13. Pubhata. At that time, as he contemplated and reflected on the teachings of the good spiritual guides, Sudana the youth was like a great ocean that insatiably takes in all the rain from the immense clouds. He then had these thoughts. The teachings of the good spiritual guides are like the spring sun, for they are able to spur growth in the sprouts and roots of all good dharmas. The teachings of the good spiritual guides are like the full moon, for they cause everything they illuminate to become clear and cool. The teachings of the good spiritual guides are like the Himalaya mountains in the summer, for they are able to rid all creatures of their burning thirst. The teachings of the good spiritual guides are like the sun shining on a fragrant flower pond, for they are able to cause the lotus flowers of all good thoughts to blossom. The teachings of the good spiritual guides are like an immense isle of jewels, for they enable the many different jewels of Dharma to completely fill one's mind. The teachings of the good spiritual guides are like the jambu tree, for they enable one to gather together all the flowers and fruit of merit and wisdom. The teachings of the good spiritual guides are like the great dragon king, for they enable one to act with easeful mastery in the spiritual powers. The teachings of the good spiritual guides are like Mount Sumeru, for they are the dwelling place of countless good dharmas, just as that mountain is the dwelling place of the Triashramsa heaven devas. And the teachings of the good spiritual guides are like Shakra, ruler of the devas, for they are surrounded by a congregation that none can outshine, and are able to vanquish the asura armies of the heterodox paths. Reflecting in this way, he then gradually traveled onward until he reached the city of Samudra Pratistana, where he searched in place after place for this Upasika. Then the many people there all told him, "Son of good family, this Upasika lives in this city in a house where she dwells." Having heard this, he then went to pay his respects and stood at her door with palms pressed together. Her house was vast, decorated with many different kinds of adornments, and was surrounded by a perimeter wall made of many kinds of jewels. All four sides had doors adorned with jewels. Having entered, Sudana saw the Upasika seated there on a jeweled seat. She was in the prime of her youth, of fine appearance, and delightfully beautiful. She was dressed in white, had flowing hair, and wore no necklaces at all. With the exception of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, no one else could match her physical appearance or the radiance of her awesome virtue. She had arranged within her house 10 kodis of seats that surpassed anything possessed by either humans or gods. All of these things had been brought about through the power of that bodhisattva's karmic works. There were no robes, food, drink, or any other kinds of life-sustaining things within her house. There was only a small bowl that had been placed in front of her. She was also surrounded by a myriad young maidens who were awe-inspiring in their deportment and physical appearance, and who were like celestial nymphs. Marvelous jeweled ornaments adorned their bodies. Their voices were beautiful and marvelous, such that whoever heard them felt pleased. They constantly served her to the left and right, drawing close and gazing up at her in admiration as they observed her with bodies respectfully stooped and heads held down, responding as appropriate to her instructions. Those maidens' bodies emitted a marvelous perfume that everywhere imbued everything with its scent. If any being so much as encountered this scent, they would all achieve irreversibility, become free of thoughts of anger or injuriousness, become free of thoughts of enmity, become free of jealous or miserly thoughts, Become free of thoughts of flattery or deviousness. Become free of treacherous or devious thoughts. Become free of thoughts of loathing or affection. Become free of thoughts of hatred. Become free of base or inferior thoughts, and become free of arrogant thoughts. They would produce thoughts of equal regard for all, arouse thoughts of great kindness, generate thoughts to benefit others, dwell in thoughts consistent with the moral codes, and abandon thoughts of desire or covetousness. When others heard their voices, they became filled with abundant, joyous delight. When others saw their bodies, they all abandoned the defilement of lust. Having seen the Upasaka Prabhuta, Sudana then bowed down in reverence at her feet, respectfully circumambulated her, pressed his palms together, stood before her, and addressed her, saying, "O Arya, I am one who has already resolved to attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Still, I do not yet know how the Bodhisattva should train in the Bodhisattva practices, and how he should cultivate the Bodhisattva path. I have heard that the Arya is well able to offer guidance and instruction. Please speak about these matters for my sake." She then spoke to him, saying, "Son of good family, I have acquired the Bodhisattva's liberation gateway of the treasury of endless merit, whereby, with such a small bowl as this, I am able to adapt to the many different kinds of desires and delights of all beings, and produce many different kinds of delectably flavored food and drink, and enable them all to be filled to satisfaction. This is so no matter whether it be for 100 beings, 1,000 beings, 100,000 beings, a koti of beings, 100 kotis of beings, 1,000 kotis of beings, 100,000 kotis of nayutas of beings, and so forth on up to an ineffable number of beings. Even if there were beings as numerous as the atoms in the entire continent of Jambudvipa, beings as numerous as the atoms in all 4 continents, beings as numerous as the atoms in a small kiliocosm's worlds, a mid-sized kiliocosm's worlds, a great kiliocosm's worlds, and so forth on up to beings as numerous as the atoms in an ineffable number of Buddhakshetras, or even if there were all beings in all worlds of the 10 directions, still I could adapt to their individual desires and delights, and thereby enable them all to be completely filled to satisfaction, and yet their food and drink would be inexhaustible and would not even be diminished in quantity at all. And just as this would be so with regard to food and drink, so too would this be so with regard to the many different kinds of supremely flavored delicacies, the many different kinds of seats, the many different kinds of robes, the many different kinds of bedding, the many different kinds of carriages, the many different kinds of flowers, the many different kinds of garlands, the many different kinds of incense, the many different kinds of perfumes, the many different kinds of burning incense, the many different kinds of powdered incense, the many different kinds of precious jewels, the many different kinds of necklaces, the many different kinds of banners, the many different kinds of pennants, the many different kinds of canopies, and the many different supremely marvelous means of subsistence. In all such cases, in accordance with whatever their minds find delightful, I enable them all to become completely satisfied. Son of good family, if the adherents of the Shravaka disciple or Pratyeka Buddha paths in a world off to the east were to eat the food I provide them, then they would all attain the corresponding fruits of their Shravaka disciple and Pratyeka Buddha paths, and would thus abide then in their very last physical body. Just as this would be so in that single world, so too would this also be the case for 100 worlds, 1,000 worlds, 100,000 worlds, a koti of worlds, 100 kotis of worlds, 1,000 kotis of worlds, 100,000 kodis of worlds, 100,000 kodis of nayadas of worlds, worlds as numerous as the atoms in the continent of Jambudvipa, worlds as numerous as the atoms in all 4 continents, worlds as numerous as the atoms in a small kiliocosm, worlds as numerous as the atoms in a mid-sized kiliocosm, worlds as numerous as the atoms in a great trikiliocosm, and so forth on up to all the Shravaka disciple and Pratyeka Buddha adherents in worlds as numerous as the atoms in an ineffable number of worlds. Even in all those cases, once they had eaten my food, they would all attain the corresponding fruits of their Shravaka disciple and Pratyeka Buddha paths, and would thus abide then in their very last physical body. And just as this would be so with respect to the East, so too would this also be so with respect to the South, the West, the North, the 4 midpoints, the zenith and the nadir. So too, son of good family, is this also true of all the bodhisattvas with but one remaining lifetime in one world to the east, and so forth on up to a number of worlds to the east as numerous as the atoms in an ineffable number of Buddha kshetras. For by merely having eaten this food of mine, they will all sit in the sight of enlightenment beneath the Bodhi tree, will vanquish Mara's armies, and will attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. And just as this is the case with the East, so too it is also so with regard to the South, the West, the North, the 4 midpoints, the zenith and the nadir. Son of good family, do you or do you not now see this retinue of mine consisting of a myriad maidens? Sudana replied, "Yes, I see them." The Upasaka then said, "Son of good family, these myriad maidens are but those who serve at the head of just such a retinue that altogether is 100 myriads of asamkheyas in number. All of them share with me the same practices, the same vows, the same roots of goodness, the same path of emancipation, the same pure resolute convictions, the same pure mindfulness, the same pure tendencies, the same measureless awakening, the same attainment of faculties, the same vast resolve, the same sphere of practice, the same principles, the same meanings, the same clear understanding of dharmas, the same pure forms and appearances, the same measureless powers, the same supreme vigor, the same right dharma sound, the same adaptation of their voices to the types of beings, the same voice that is foremost in its purity, the same praise of the countless pure meritorious qualities, the same pure karmic works, the same pure karmic rewards, the same great kindness that everywhere rescues everyone, the same great compassion that everywhere ripens all beings, the same pure physical karmic deeds that adapt to the conjunction and arising of conditions and please those who see them, the same pure verbal karmic deeds that adapt to worldly discourse in proclaiming the Dharma's transformative teaching, the same going to pay respects in all Buddha's congregations, the same going to pay our respects and make offerings to all Buddhas in all Buddha kshetras, the same ability to directly see all Dharma gateways, and the same abiding on the Bodhisattva's grounds of pure practice. Son of good family, these myriad maidens are able to take such superior food and drink from this bowl, whereupon, in the instant of but a single kshana, they go everywhere throughout the 10 directions to make offerings to all those bodhisattvas, Shravaka disciples, and Pratyeka Buddhas abiding in their very last physical body, while also going to all the other rebirth destinies, including even the rebirth destiny of the hungry ghosts, where they enable them all to become completely satisfied. Son of good family, using this bowl of mine, these myriad maidens are able to cause those in the heavens to become completely satisfied with heavenly food, while also being able to cause those in the human realm to become completely satisfied with the food that humans consume. Son of good family, wait a moment. You should see this for yourself. After she said this, Sudana then saw countless beings enter from the 4 doors. They were all those whom the Upasaka had invited to come through the power of her original vows. After they had all come and gathered, they were shown to their seats, whereupon they were provided with food and drink in accordance with their needs, so that they were all caused to become completely satisfied. She then informed Sudana, "Son of good family, I know only this liberation gateway of the treasury of endless merit. As for all the meritorious qualities of the Bodhisattva Mahasattvas, who are like a great ocean in that they are extremely deep and inexhaustible, who are like empty space in that they are boundlessly vast, who are like wish-fulfilling jewels in that they fulfill beings' wishes, who are like a large city in that one may obtain whatever one seeks to acquire from them, who are like Mount Sumeru in that the many different kinds of precious jewels are all completely collected together there, who are like a hidden treasury in that they always store up the wealth of Dharma, who are like a bright lamp in that they dispel all darkness, who are like a lofty canopy in that they everywhere shade the many kinds of beings. How could I know of or be able to speak about their meritorious qualities and practices? Son of good family, south of here there is a city known as Mahasambhava, or Great Flourishing. There is a householder there known as Vidvan, or Clear Knowledge. You should go there, pay your respects, and ask him, how should the Bodhisattva train in the Bodhisattva practices, and how should he cultivate the Bodhisattva path? Sudana the youth then bowed down in reverence at her feet and circumambulated her countless times while continuing to gaze up at her in tireless admiration, after which he respectfully withdrew and departed.